Shoot.
if you look at it that way.
Yeah.
There's so many things.
Yes.
They come after us and say.
Okay, we're gonna start, folks. I believe today that Commissioner Ludwig will not be with us. Keep his family in their prayers, please. Though Deb is going through a pretty tough day. So given that, we do have this meeting live streamed. We do have people that have called in, and we respect that. We appreciate that you're doing that. And with that, we will call the meeting to order and we'll rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is public forum time. Tim, do you want to say something?
Name is Jim Schmutzer. Thank you. On your consent agenda, I work with Phase Industries in town here. On your consent agenda, item 7, you have 2 determination of need applications that you'll be seeing. Those are involve our program. And what it's asking is our licensing through the Minnesota Department of Human Services requires that lead agencies submit requested changes to a license through them. We have 2 of them, one in our old recycling building, one in our main site right next door. And what we're doing, we are selling our main site to the city of Sandstone, and they'll remodel it into a new public library, which we're all really excited about. And then in our old recycling site, we're doing a really big renovation project to turn that into a multi-use facility. So it'll have meeting space, program space, new technology, manufacturing space. So it's, instead of just a shell of a building, which it kind of is now, it'll actually be multifunctional and multi-use. To do that, we need to ask, actually you, I need to ask the Minnesota Department of Human Services to approve ending our license at our main site, the beige building, and then expanding our license, meaning the number of people we can serve in the old recycling building. And that's number 7. And I just wanted to give a quick intro and comment on that. And if you had any questions before you get to that, I'd be happy to answer.
I'm just so glad that you explained that, because I asked David, reading the agenda weekend and going, what in the world is this all about? So thank you very much. It makes perfect sense now.
Great.
The library is really excited.
Thank you. Yes, it was a perfect marriage.
Yeah, good. Thanks much, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Time to come and explain that. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody dialed in, Ryan? Okay. We'll look to adopt the agenda. Are there any additions, corrections?
Mr. Chair, we have 2 additions to the consent agenda. Item 3.1, that's the Pine County Commissioners Expense Claim Forms. And if we could add consent agenda item number 4.1, the appointment of Veteran Service Officer Mindy Sendell as the point of contact for the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs. And then we have some additional information for regular agenda item number 7, budget discussion and preliminary levy.
Move the agenda.
I'll second it.
There a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. Any discussion? If not, everybody say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Almost forgot how to do that. Is those of you dialed in without somebody at a remote video site, we do not have to do roll call votes. We'll go back to our traditional way. Approval of the minutes from September 7th County Board meeting and summary for publication, and the minutes of the September 14th special meeting committee as a whole.
I'll make a motion to accept those.
I can second.
Motion by Lovegren, second by Waldham to approve the minutes. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, sign. And then minute of the boards, reports and correspondence, Pine County Chemical Health Coalition minutes from September 13th, 2021.
I'll make a motion to accept those. And I'd like to add that we do have that Lions Heart crew coming up and it's going to be going to all the schools and it's going to be a really good, if they have it open to the public and if you can go attend it, because I think it's going to just be a really positive thing for our county and for our kids in the county.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Lovegren, seconded by Moore. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the consent items with the additions there.
I'll make a motion to accept those.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Lovegren, seconded by Moore to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That brings us here to the regular agenda. Personnel Committee report.
That's me, huh?
I suppose that's you, Josh.
Sorry. Okay, Personnel Committee, we met on September 13th. Made the following recommendations. Acknowledge the resignation of social worker Sarah Manor effective September 3rd, 2021, and approve backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. Sheriff's Office recommend the approval of filling the fourth sergeant position on a hire ahead basis and approve backfill of any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. Any internal promotion would be contingent upon return to the original position. The sergeant on leave returns to Pine County. So just a little bit more on that. There's been a sergeant that's on leave for quite a while. So Jeff wants to fill that position and then and just because we need it. So that's kind of why. And also in the sheriff's office, dispatch acknowledge the resignation of dispatcher Gina Lindo effective August 20th, 2021, and approve backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. In the jail, geez, Sheriff, you got a lot of stuff on here. Acknowledge the resignation of jail administrative assistant Darnell Van Hale effective September 8th and approve backfill the position, any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. Acknowledge the resignation of lead county security officer Steve Olson effective September 21 and approve backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. Recruitment will be considered at a later date. The reason that is because we haven't really had the need for it right now because the courts aren't really doing a whole lot. But so we're just kind of in a holding pattern from what I understand till that heats up again and then we'll figure it out. We'll get that hired again. Figured out exactly what we're going to do, I guess. So. Veteran Services, ratify the separation of Veteran Services Officer Benjamin Weiner effective September 3rd and approve backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. And with that, I will make a recommendation to approve the Personnel Committee report.
I'll second that.
Got a motion by Moore, seconded by Lovegren to approve the report that was just read for the from the Personnel Committee. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I got a question if I can. All the all the resignations. Is there, I mean, do you guys do, or does the county do like, why is there so many people leaving? I guess we just had discussions of, trying to retain help and, especially with everything that went on this last year and a half with COVID and the difficulties in the private sector trying to find. Is there?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a single reason, right? Everybody leaves for different reasons. In Steve Olson's case, it's the courts have not been functioning, so we have not been able to give him work. And so I think he needs to find, a job that he can actually get hours with. I know some of the other people just had personal reasons. Jackie, I think, is on the call and I know does exit interviews. And so I don't know if there's anything, Jackie, that you want to share with the board as far as trends or what you're seeing.
Good morning. I do conduct exit interviews and there's nothing I feel that's alarming. We have just, we go through cycles like this and, the reasons have been varying, such as Dave has already described. We have people that have been in taking additional schooling that had planned on furthering their career in other areas. We've had retirements. So nothing that I'm seeing that should really cause any alarm. People have just, some have decided just to move into other areas as well.
So resonate, that could be just a regular retirement. Actually, okay.
They retire, it says retirement.
What's that? Oh, so there's.
Yeah, so these are people that are moving on to something different.
Oh.
Yes, on this agenda, yes, I don't think there were any retirements. I think they were all resignations. But just acknowledging that we have had several retirements throughout the year.
Okay. I was just curious.
Good question.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thanks. Anyway, we any other questions? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then number 2 is the promotion action.
Mr. Chair, so ordinarily this would be on the consent agenda, except for it relates to an action that the board just approved in the personnel committee. So we couldn't put it before that was official. So this is to fill that 4th sergeant position with a promotion.
I'll make that motion to approve Deputy Sheriff Joe Workman to the position of sergeant.
I can second.
We got a motion by Moore, seconded by Waldham to authorize the approval to promote Deputy Sheriff Joe Workman.
And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I could just add the note that the personnel committee made that it may, it's dependent upon the sergeant on leave remaining on leave.
Yeah, because we didn't authorize 5 sergeants, we authorized 4. Good thinking, guys. Anyway, any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Establishing a Pine County Personnel Administrative System.
So, Mr. Chair, this is the final action to make official the county's exit from the merit system. And we have been approved by the commissioner to exit.
And this is
So,
it's a year process to get out.
yep, so if you adopt this resolution, we will exit the merit system as of December 31st will be our last day, and January 1st, 2022 will be our first day out.
Okay.
I will make a motion to.
Okay.
Yes,
It's been a lot of work by a lot of people.
it's exciting.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Lovegren, second by Moore to authorize the Pine County establishment of its resolution, actually 2021-65, establishment of merit system of personnel, administrative and authorized board. All right. Any questions on that?
I got a question. Is there some more supplemental information out there, anything I could look at for that? Or what exactly is it?
I'll say, sure. This has been so under federal requirements, each county that has a human services department that administers federal funds has to function under what is called a merit system of employment. So all counties in Minnesota by default participate in the Minnesota merit system, which is administered by the Department of Human Services. If counties have a personnel system that meets the federal requirements, they can exit the merit system. And so we have spent the last year going through the process of demonstrating that our personnel system meets the federal requirements.
So in practical matters, JJ, what has happened is we'll go through the interview process and stuff. And if the person that we want to hire in HHS isn't on the state merit list, we can't hire them because we won't get any reimbursement for that person. With that program, whatever they administer in that program would be null and void. So we have to hire off that merit system. It's a clumsy thing because it slows down that whole process, sometimes at least by a month or more.
Okay.
So we're geared up now and fully capable of doing our own internal hiring. And we feel comfortable doing that. So we will quit paying the state merit system and we'll take on that responsibility ourselves.
You said that's for HHS
Yes.
only?
That was the only program area that we've used the state merit system for.
And that there's a cost to that where the counties that are in the merit system pay for the administration of that. In recent years, there have been a significant number of counties who have left the merit system. And so in 2021, St. Louis County and some other big entities left, which reduced the population by about a quarter. And so the costs are expected to increase significantly in coming years for those who are staying in the merit system. And so our timing actually worked out pretty well.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for asking questions. We've got a motion and a second. Any more questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative Participation. You got her, Coach?
We'll see. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Jerry Fawcett, Probation Director. Asking the board to consider approval of resolution to allow the Probation Department to work collaboratively with the Department of Corrections to commence a Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. I had a meeting with the Deputy Commissioner and the JDAI coordinator a few weeks ago. As you have in your handout, JDAI is kind of the gold standard, if you will, on how we should work with juveniles. It really started out with a collaboration nationally with the Annie Casey Foundation. Big cities was and is still a big deal in terms of placing too many kids of color or any kids for that matter in secure detention. We know here in Pine County, we do better than that. We have a risk assessment instrument that we use, but we still have a disproportionate amount of American Indian children on probation in the juvenile system. And so they reached out to me, and my question to them was, well, we think we do pretty good work here with juveniles. Why do we need JDAI in terms of detention stuff? They said, well, JDAI is kind of now shifting. It's not just about detention anymore. It's about how to do good work with juveniles. And they know that Pine County does some good work. So it's really about highlighting the good work that we do in Pine County. And also just, if there's a way that we can continue to work with them and they can collect data from us, or we can get some more ideas about how we can further reduce the number of juveniles that we have in detention or kids of color, more kids of color on probation overall. And I think it's a good partnership. And all it really requires of us is to send them quarterly reports about data. And so my juvenile department was all for it because I think, when we do our comp plan, we're not afraid of data and we like to show our work. And I think this is just another part of that. Any questions?
Well, thanks for explaining it, because I figured you would, so.
Yeah, like I said, at JDAI, when I started in this business, I think I've said this before, a PO could get mad at a kid on a Friday, lock him up over the weekend, let him out on Monday. It didn't do anything for the kid, just made the PO sleep better for the weekend. And the country has done a much better job in how we work with kids over the years. But, there's also gold standards of how we can work with kids in the community, and our evening reporting center is a piece of that too. And I think that's another reason the DOC's interested in working with us, is because we have taken those next steps about good practices with juveniles.
How long will it be before we get some good data from that evening reporting center?
It kind of had I did have it when I was talking to my staff, getting ready for this. I said you had asked that question. And you probably would ask it again. So we have made notes, and it is part of our data collection process with that ERC. We just changed directors now to the ERC. And so once we onboard him, then we're going to start to drill down and get that data.
Good. Josh?
So it says there's 400 jurisdictions across the country. So this is a pretty big deal to get involved with this. It's not.
Yeah, JDI, and even when I was in ARC was a part of JDAI, and that was a big effort. The people from the state would come on in, and we'd have regular monthly meetings with that, and that had everything to do with all the practices around the Arrowhead Juvenile Center. How come there are so many African American and American Indian kids in the Arrowhead Juvenile Center? That's where that started. And so my first question to them when they approached me was, well, do you know we're part of a joint powers agreement with the East Central Regional Juvenile Center? And have you reached out to them? Because I'm just a member. And this was a little bit different focus for them, is really kind of our unique and I would say positive practices in the field side versus the detention side. So it's still called JDAI. Their focus with us is little about detention, more about the field.
Well, good. That's
Good.
exciting. Good for you guys.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
Motion to do this.
And it's resolution 2021-64.
Yep.
So I will pass a motion to approve resolution 2021-64 to allow Pine County Probation to work with the Department of Corrections.
I can second.
Okay, we got a motion by Lugger, second by Waltab to approve resolution 2021-64. Is there any questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 2020 audit and financial statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Kelly Schroeder, County Auditor Treasurer. And so before you this morning, you were handed printed copies of the financial statements and audit. I have a quick slideshow to go through just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview. I could probably spend a couple hours going through each page of this because I think it's fun, but I understand that most people don't. So I won't do that. I've just got some high points and just some discussion too of some of the audit findings. And so with that, we'll skip ahead. So the report that you received this morning, there's kind of two main parts. The first is the financial statements, which the financial statements is the bulk of what you received. About the first 135 pages is the financial statements. And the financial statements are in 4 segments. The first is the management discussion and analysis. So that's just kind of the first section that gives you kind of the commentary of where we were, how we got to where we are now. And it really is kind of the easier to read, more useful information. And then you run into the basic financial statements, starting about page 20. And that is really like your balance sheet and your fund balances and things like that. revenues and expenditure statements. And then after that, for the next about 100 pages, are the supplementary information. And so the government accounting standards has certain things that's required to be in these sections. The general required information is more like the budgetary comparisons for our major funds. So it looks at what was our budget, what did we actually spend, or what did we actually bring in? And then it also goes through our post-employment benefits. And then our other supplementary information that's required goes through a lot of our non-major funds. So we've got a lot of those little funds out there that we set up that get reported separately from like our general fund and our road and bridge. Our fiduciary funds, our intergovernmental revenue schedule, and then our schedule of federal awards that's a kind of, once you get towards the very end, that type of information. And then at page about 136 is where actually the audit report starts. And this is from the state auditor's office, is who audits our financials and our internal controls. And so part of that audit report looks at both our financial statements and decides if we are presenting our financials correctly, and we received an unmodified opinion of that. And as we skip ahead, I'll get kind of more into what that means. In our financial statements, there was one significant deficiency identified. And again, I will hit on that as we get through a couple more slides here of what that was and what that means. And then because we received more than $750,000 in federal funds, they have to do a federal single audit, which means that they look at specific federal programs, our major federal programs, and determine if we are following the federal requirements with them, if we're following the grant agreements, and then they issue opinions on that. For 2020, the only program that they looked at was our CARES Act program. Previously, it was our medical assistance program they had looked at. When they looked at our CARES Act, we received a qualified opinion, which again, later in my presentation, I'll get to what that means, but that means that we did things correctly with the exception of something. And so we'll get into what that something is in just a minute here. In 2019, we received an unmodified opinion. So that's essentially a clean opinion of what we did. And in 2018, we received an unmodified / qualified opinion. So that was kind of like everything was done correctly except for these teeny little things. And if you remember in 2018, that was our medical assistance program. They found 2 files that didn't have date stamps. So that's as detailed as this gets. But we'll go through why they gave us a qualified opinion this year. So just an overview of the financial statements. This is taken right out of the management and discussion and analysis section, and it just really compares 2019 to 2020 revenues. Bottom left is 2019, top right is 2020, and shows where our revenues come from. As I look at this, it's a little bit, it's interesting to look at just because I feel like it got skewed because there's $3.6 million of revenue in there from CARES Act that wouldn't have been in there without the pandemic. So things get a little bit skewed in that our operating grants and contributions, all of a sudden it looks like it's 39%. And you might think, where did that come from? Well, that's the CARES Act. And when that takes up a bigger portion of the pie, then other portions go down. Moving on to the expenses of where those got broken down. And again, when I look at this, it's again skewed because of that CARES Act spending. For example, bottom left, when you look at 2019, you see economic development. We had 0% of spending in economic development. But then when you get to 2020, you look and it's 4%. That 4% is completely CARES Act dollars doing those business grants. And so it ends up a bit skewed. For example, also public safety. It looks like we spent less in 2020 on public safety than we did in 2019. Well, we had over $500,000 of public safety expense that we paid out of CARES Act. And so again, that makes it a little bit skewed. But it also, I mean, it is an accurate depiction of where those funds were spent. It just is a little bit, it's hard to do apples to apples from year to year because of that funding source. As we get further into the financials, they show budget to actuals. Oh, my table got a little off. Sorry about that. Anyways, budget to actuals. So we looked at what was our budget for expenditures, what did each of the funds actually spend, and what is the difference? So in the general fund, we had a budgeted expense of about $18.8 million. When all was said and done, we spent only $18.4 million. So there was a difference of just over $400,000 that we were able to put into our reserves because of the less expenditures. Again, a lot, that's thanks to the CARES Act, because we were able to shift some of those expenditures out of the general fund over to the CARES Act. Road and bridge, you might look at that and be a little bit concerned. It shows that we had an $11.4 million expenditure planned in the budget and we spent $13.9 million. However, that's just a function of how the highway department works. We receive a lot of revenues in one year to do a lot of projects the next year. And so it looks like we overspent ourselves by almost $2.5 million, but that was planned. We had received that revenue the previous year, and so then we were planning to spend that in reserves. Human Services had a budgeted expenditure of almost $12 million and was only spent about $11 million. And in my mind, that's a huge testament to some of the decisions, the hard decisions Becky made during the pandemic. There were things that, there were lots of hard decisions and canceled contracts and things that she did to make sure that they came out okay on the other side.
So in effect, we put $409,000 more than we thought we were going to into our general fund bank account, our reserve account.
Right.
And we put almost $1 million into the HHS reserve account.
Correct. And we get into that a little bit more here. So this goes through the fund balances of those major funds. And so we've got the general fund, road and bridge, HHS, and land. So your very first row there tells you where we started out the year. The next row down shows you how much it increased or decreased. And so you'll notice back here, I said that our expenditures were $408,000 less than what we thought they would be. But yet you see our actual fund balance going up more than that. And so that's a function of additional revenues that also came in. And I don't show the budget to actual revenues, but that is a function of, it wasn't only $408,000 that our fund balance went up. It was actually more than that. It was just over $1 million. So end of 2020, general fund balance, $6.8 million. I think back in July, I had given a presentation when we kicked off the budget process and showed a historical fund balance. In 2011, thanks to a $500,000 transfer from highway, our fund balance was $800,000 in the general fund. So it shows that all the hard work that's gone on these last 9 years. Within the general fund, we always talk about how those funds are allocated. So they are allocated in restricted funds. So meaning there's statute that says you can only spend these funds within their certain ways. There's assigned, so that's the county board has taken action and said, we only want to spend these funds this certain way. So the majority of that is the jail canteen fund that we created in 2019. And the other part of that is the elections fund and that assigned line. Those are things that the county board's taken action and said, we want to set these funds aside. Statute doesn't say we have to, but we want to do it. And then the remaining balance of the $6.8 million that isn't restricted or assigned is just unrestricted. And so that's just over $5 million. And then running through the other funds, it shows how things have lined up. Again, road and bridge, you look over here that we overexpended by $2.5 million, but you don't see the fund balance going down by $2.5 million because of those revenues coming in. I don't know if there's any other questions. I could go through each one, but it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, Dave.
How does highway end up with a negative unassigned?
It's very strange in my mind. So typically in road and bridge and in HHS and land, essentially everything is in there assigned for the purpose of that fund. But yet road and bridge for years has carried this little unassigned balance. I'm not sure where it came from. At some point, we could probably research it back and see where that came from. And it's negative. If you look at the far right column, total all funds, beginning of 2020, we had $14 million. End of 2020, we had $24 million. So it looks like we put $10 million in the bank, and that seems like a lot, and that is a lot. And that's because there's just over $8 million of the bond refunding proceeds that were there. So in the fall of 2020, we refinanced or refunded our courthouse bonds. And so we got those proceeds in our bank account. However, we couldn't pay off those bonds until January of 2021. So we carried that $8 million to the new year, made us look really good in this aspect for at the end of the year, but then it went away right in January. My next slide, the slide after this goes through the debt. And so on the counter side, it looks like we have a significant amount of debt at the end of 2020 as well. And so we'll see that in a slide from now. Cash in investments. So I have just a list of where our funds are sat as of 12/31 and what their balances were. The magic fund, a lot of people hear that and go, wow, I want one of those. But that is the Minnesota Association of Governments investing for counties. And so that's what the magic fund is. It's the group of counties doing investments together. You can kind of look at it similar to a money market account. It usually has a higher interest rate than just a regular savings account, but you can pull money in and out of there every day. We've got certificates of deposit at 3.6 million, just funds sitting in the bank at just over $10 million. But again, that $10 million includes $8 million of those bond funds that we're leaving in just a couple weeks after the 12/31 date. Then our change funds is literally our funds that we've got at the courthouse to make change.
The drop in interest.
Yes, so 2019 was my first year as auditor, and we took on some new investment strategies in that the magic fund had the highest interest rate. And so rather than carrying a balance in our checking account, I carried most everything in the magic fund and got those interest rates, but I did a significant amount of transfers. Almost every week I was transferring money from the magic fund to the checking account. It maximized our interest. So in 2019, we did really well on interest. And then we all know March of 2020, everything, the bottom fell out of everything. And so when I saw where the 2020 earnings ended up, actually, I was pretty happy with that, considering starting in March, the best investment I could find was at about 1%. And I thought that was good. And then by July, the best investment I could find was at 0.1%. So things really dropped off. 2021, I put the number where we're at through August. And I mean, in reality, that's doing pretty good. The good news is we had some investments that were not callable, that were locked in at higher interest rates. So we're still able to benefit from those. But we do have some, like I've got 2 that are maturing this month. And so the best that I can find is a 0.6% interest rate going from a 2.5. And so, I mean, we're always looking for those opportunities, but they're very few and far between at this point. And also, like at this point, excuse me, I'm trying not to invest for terribly long term because I don't want to tie up money for 5 years at 0.5% when we know in 2 or 3 years from now, we're hopefully going to be back at that 1 to 2% interest rate. So right now it's a little bit of a interesting balancing act of how do we maximize those interest earnings, but yet not tie us up into the future. Debt. And so, I think that these changed by being projected, maybe. So, because that didn't overlay before. Anyways, our debt. So as I said earlier, we refinanced that 2012 courthouse bonds last fall, but yet as of 12/31, we couldn't pay them off because we couldn't pay them off till January because of their call date. So like that 2012 courthouse bonds, first column just shows you the very beginning balance when we first took out that bond, what it was, what our balance of it is today, which on that one is now 0. And then on 12/31, what our financial statement showed we were carrying. And so that 2012 courthouse bonds was replaced then with that 2020 courthouse bonds. So my very bottom row there, which is kind of overshadowed now, showed, you know, our 12/31 balance, 2020 was over $31 million, which was very, I mean, it was high because we were carrying 2 courthouse bonds. But currently now we're $10 million less than that at 21 million. My numbers that you can't see very well just show you what our debt payments are annually or have been annually since 2018. So in 2020, they were just almost $2.4 million with 1.6 million coming off the principal during 2020. So you can kind of look at it and see how fast we're going to be paying those down. The right column is the one that I like the far right one's the one that I like the best, the payoff year. So in 2031, both those larger ones will be paid off, and then we'd just be left with the smaller one for this building till 2033. We did receive information from Ellers, who is our financial consultant, that 2015 bond, if we could refund it right now, we should, but because we're not at that call date, we can't yet. That call date will be in 2023. And so should interest rates stay somewhat stable, we potentially would be looking at refunding that one come in 2023, which we'd start that process in 2022. Right now, they were calculating about a $250,000 total savings by lowering that interest rate. And so now we get into our audit findings and our audit report. So they give it in 2 sections, just like I talked about earlier, the financial statements. They gave us an unmodified opinion, and then they look at our internal controls. And so essentially how we do things. And we had no material weaknesses, meaning they did not find any numbers that were misstated or would mislead people in our financial aspects, but they did find a significant deficiency. I'm going to just jump to the next slide of what those things mean. So an unmodified opinion is the best audit opinion you can get. It just means that statements are fairly represented in all material respects. So it's the cleanest audit opinion you can get. However, with that, with our financial statements, they did find this significant deficiency. And so what that is a significant deficiency says that they think that there potentially could be a misstatement. However, that misstatement isn't material. It doesn't mislead you on the county's financial picture. And so we will jump into what, I think I'll just jump into what that was. The auditors this year pulled, in our highway department, we have inventory. So you've got however many windshield wiper blades and however many nuts and bolts. Sherry has an inventory system that she tracks all of that stuff coming in and out and the value of it. It's a program through Avenue. It's called New Roads. In 2017, that program went through a major overhaul. And so this issue we've traced back to that. So when the auditors looked at our inventory, they found that some of the prices that were showing on our inventory list were not correct, based on what things were recently purchased for. And also we did not document our quantity amounts of certain items. So the quantity amounts is the thing I'll talk about first. And so what they were looking at was our salt and our sand. We marked down at 12/31 of how much salt and sand we have on hand. We didn't have documentation of how that was calculated. I've now learned we have 8-foot sections in our salt and sand sheds. Each 8-foot section holds X amount of yards or tons of the material, and that's how it's calculated. But we can tell the auditors that all day long, and they say, but you have to prove that that's how much you had. So going forward, we will now take pictures. Same with our fuel. So, I mean, he looks at the fuel, what it shows remaining on the fuel tank, and writes, oh, we had half a tank, which is 500 gallons, but we didn't have proof of those things. So we now will take a picture of them and keep that in our file. The other part with the incorrect price that they noted, this is a result of that computer system. We've had this computer system for quite some time. However, with that overhaul in 2017, when we get new items in at new prices, the old program would just recalculate and say, okay, you just bought these new ones at $5, but you bought the old ones at $10. So now we take an average at $7.50. We're going to value them at. Well, in 2017, after our overhaul that was supposed to make things better, it turns out the system doesn't automatically recalculate that anymore. Every time Sherry does an update now, she has to push a button and have it recalculate. And we did not know that. So we know that now and we've corrected it. But it was what they were finding as our deficiency in that our values were being listed wrong. And so the two items which they looked at, they said it overstated our inventory by 61,466. I've calculated a whole bunch out too. And I mean, some of them were overstating, some of them were understating. And so it's going to be corrected going forward now that Sherry knows to hit the button. And we'll move on. So that was the financial statements, federal awards. So again, they looked at, they only looked at the CARES Act grant. And so as a reminder, we got those funds in July of 2020, $3.6 million, and we had till November 30th to spend them, or we didn't get to spend them in Pine County. So we made some of the best decisions we could and thought, well, we'll see what the auditors say, because all along I was contacting the auditors saying, is this okay? Is this okay? And they were saying, we don't have any direction yet. And so we were making the best decisions that we could. So based on that, they did identify a material weakness. So that means that they believe that there were funds spent that they don't agree with. And we'll get into what those were. And that gave us a qualified audit opinion with our federal programs. So what a qualified audit program means is that, we represented everything fairly, but there was some sort of issue or issues. And so those issues were, this is their main issue. When they looked at our subrecipients, so those are people who we didn't buy something, we gave them money, someone else money to do something. So when they looked at that, they noted we did not have an agreement in place with one of those entities that we gave money to. And so that one entity is the library. Because the library had put in a request for about $63,000. The county board heard the request and granted it, but there was no written agreement. I tried to argue that we have a commissioner that sits on the library board. It's a joint powers. It's essentially us, but it wasn't acceptable to them. So now we know there will always be a written agreement in place. Two recipients were not provided sufficient award information. And so those were the Historical Society and the Initiative Foundation. We did not provide them with our CFDA number within the written documentation that they received. So every federal fund has a specific federal identification number that goes with them. And those two entities we didn't give it to.
Wasn't the Initiative Foundation the ones that administered the whole program?
Well, but when we gave the money to the Initiative Foundation.
So we gave them money to disperse.
Right,
Yeah.
Right.
right.
Yep, and so it's the transaction from us to the Initiative Foundation that we didn't tell them the specific number for the CARES Act.
And then we did do some direct appropriations, and the Historical Society was one
Right,
that did not go through the Initiative Foundation.
right. And then two recipients did not have sufficient monitoring procedures. So within the federal code, it says that we have to make sure, as the recipient of this funds, we have to make sure that the person we're giving the funds to is spending it correctly. And so for the most part, we did a lot of things on a reimbursement basis. So we got receipts, we paid them. there were two sub-recipients that they identified that they didn't feel we did that correctly with. One was the Historical Society, because we just gave them an appropriation without them giving us a list of things we just decided, okay, we're giving them, I think it was $50,000.
Can I add we had a list of things. We didn't have receipts.
Right, yes. And so we didn't verify that they had spent it on those specific things when we gave them the funds. And they hadn't even spent it on those specific things when we gave them the funds. And so there was that one. And then there was actually a small business in Hinckley that through the Initiative Foundation got a grant. And they didn't agree. And it was like a $3,000 grant they got through the Initiative Foundation, this business. And they did not think that their receipts were sufficient. I thought they were sufficient. Don at the Initiative Foundation thought they were sufficient, but the state auditors didn't think they were sufficient. So they list them here. And so with all of these things, I think as with this, we have to put together a corrective action plan. So with all of these things, I mean, Title II of the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations is where it tells you you're supposed to do these things. So I've reviewed that. I've got it now. We're doing it with our ARPA funds. And so that's our takeaway was my takeaway from this. And really, I think that looking at this, we did a darn good job with spending that much money and getting it out the door, spending it here in this community, and not just sending it back to the state.
I feel confident. We made good decisions. We had to make a lot of decisions in a hurry.
Fast.
And I think if that's what was wrong, I guess
So be it.
I'll stand up and say we did the best we could.
Right. Yes. And in the end, like with some of these I had asked, I said, well, are you going to require us to pay it back? And the state auditor's opinion was no, because you could have paid your entire sheriff's office salary with the funds and had to pay it back. So we're not going to require you to pay it back. They did note the federal government could look at some of these things and come along and require us to pay it back, but it's unlikely because we do have so many other expenses that it could have been used on. One other item that they found within our internal controls was looking at our purchases of items between $25,000 and $175,000. State statute and our purchasing policy requires us to receive at least 2 quotes when we purchase things in that between those dollar amounts. They had 2 situations that they found that we didn't have them. We weren't able to get them the quotes. We had the quotes. However, unfortunately, the employee who was in charge of these purchases was out. And so we just were unable to get them the copies of the quotes. So we had them, but it is here nor there. So in the end, we are just going to plan on whenever any of those new assets come in, ask for copies of the quotes as soon as the asset comes in, and it shouldn't be a problem moving forward. I think that's it. Questions, comments?
Wow.
And now when you can't sleep tonight, you can read some more.
And just so you know, if you want things to change in the future, let Kelly know, but I have always felt more comfortable having Kelly explain this than having the state auditors drive up here and explain it, because they're used to talking to other auditors. Kelly's used to talking to us. And so it comes across as something I can understand. I sat through the exit interview. I think those ladies said the same thing. I had to ask Kelly to interpret it at the end. So I'm not an auditor, but I think it works better this way. But they certainly are willing to come up and present.
I think really it's a good thing that we had the CARES Act money first, because we can find out what their take is on how that was handled. because the ARPA is so much bigger, yeah,
And longer.
right, right.
I want to commend the whole staff for that whole CARES Act thing. It was something that was brand new to all of us. We turned a lot of money around to a lot of businesses and nonprofits in this county who did really amazing things with it. Kept a lot of people in business. There was a bunch of remodeling that got done in some businesses, and they came out of the other end of this thing in better shape. So I feel that's good. Yes.
On your inventory deal, it's funny because you probably learned a lot more about my business than
Oh, man.
interest and JJ's too. But I would argue that because we go off of replacement costs, what it costs to buy it today, not average. We can, and we have an average cost, but when we report it and everything, like our live inventories are what it is today.
Yeah, but so our system always says that we've gone on the average,
Yeah.
but it wasn't even going off what it was today. It was going off what it was in 2017 because nothing had been recalculated since 2017.
So when we move, is this program still going to be under Avenue that the highway department uses?
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
If you want, you can look at my financial statements. Your board.
We
Trying
do
Presentation next week. I mean, no.
we need a formal motion to accept the report, audit report as presented.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Got a motion made by Moore, second by Lovegren. Is there any questions, discussion?
Thank you, Kelly.
Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Appointment of Housing Redevelopment Authority Commissioner. Appointment of Steve Oswald from District 4. And appointment of Leah Jackson as District 5.
I'll make the motion.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Waldham, seconded by Moore to make those appointments to the HRA. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? And then we'll move on to the budget discussion.
You have spent a lot of time over the last several weeks thinking about the budget and the levy. The last time we met, there was a balanced budget with a 4% levy. There was conversation that made me think that there was a higher comfort level with a 3.6% levy than a 4% levy. And so we did go back and do some further pencil sharpening. And Becky in Health and Human Services did identify some state funding that she is getting that we can use to supplant about $80,000 of levy going to HHS. And so that would allow the levy to be reduced to a 3.6% increase. And so I think today there's a balanced budget with a 3.6% levy increase that makes some use of reserves. But I think based on the report you just got from Kelly, the county has done well managing its reserves over the last few years. We are in unprecedented times in regard to uncertainty. And so it seems to me to make sense to use some targeted reserves to balance the budget. And so I guess I'm looking for your thought and direction. And if you are comfortable, you can approve a preliminary levy today. And if you're not comfortable, you can postpone that to a special meeting that you would call between now and the end of September.
What's your druthers?
I would just like to say thank you. When we first look at this, it's gotten a little easier over the years, but I never I never dreamed, what was our initial gap? 1.5?
1.4 million.
1.4 million was our original gap. And we got down to 4 was really hard, but then we looked at it. And wouldn't it be cool that we had 60% tax capacity? So that's where we came up with the 3.6. So I don't know.
If I can comment, because I agree that for me, it has gotten easier. I think for department heads, it's gotten harder, right? Because my expectations anyways, and their understanding of their budgets has increased to the point where they do much of the hand wringing to figure out how can we maintain a service level with no levy increase, as in the case of highway, or even a levy decrease in the case of HHS.
I would agree, David. I think we've changed this process, and the thing that's made it so much easier for a county commissioner is we've got the best department heads in the state of Minnesota. And I don't just say that to say that. I say that because those people work extremely hard. They know the position we're in. We would love to have a zero levy every year. Reality says that that's not going to happen. I just came back from a commissioners conference where people from all over the state were there. And I think most of them would be very envious of the process we have. And if 3.6 is where we're going, they'd be very envious of that. The reason I feel good about it is because I don't feel good about the things that got left out, but I feel good that we have a lot of people that have figured out how to get there. And that takes hard work. It doesn't take throwing a dart at the wall and saying, okay, I'm done. So I hats off to those people. I appreciate the work they've done.
Mr. Chair, when you add the fact that salaries, wages, compensation is 3+%,
Right.
and we're at 3.6, and the fact that we do serve the public, and to know that our public gets served, they get the things that they need, it is very impressive. And I too am really, we're blessed with our department heads and the people that work for Pine County. It's huge.
And if you ask, what are the priorities in this budget? In my mind, they're pretty simple. And that is the board acted to extend the sales tax for transportation because transportation is important. And then the board acted to add an additional sergeant to the sheriff's office because public safety is important. And so bringing in any levy increase is not anyone's first choice, but to bring in a budget that adds a sergeant and maintains all the other services at a 3.6%, I think that's remarkable. And that maybe if you talk to your colleagues around the state, that I would think that they would find that remarkable.
And that is part of what you said prior is, you've done it in the past, 0, minus, and all you did is kick the can, depleted reserves, and then we spent a lot of time trying to get it back up. So you don't want to go down that road, but I think this is a good medium. With that, I will make a motion to set the preliminary levy. Do you want me the dollar amount?
The dollar amount.
So it would be $20,652,675.
And I will second that.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Did you?
being new to this, we set it at that, but then there's still a chance something might flush out where that could even be lower. Yeah,
Absolutely.
It just can't go.
can't go higher.
Chance we can't do is we can't go higher. The tax statement, preliminary tax statements will be calculated at this amount. reality, I like to be a realist. I know I talked to countless county commissioners who said, oh, we're setting our preliminary levy at 7 or 9 or 11 or whatever. And then we're gonna end up at, well, why don't you just start there, you know? But, because I think that's what we've really tried to do. We can, if I know our department heads, I know David and Kelly, if we see an opportunity, they're, I think, on a daily basis, scrubbing that budget, looking for something that might qualify for ARPA funds. And then we can do better, but yes, we can.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Yeah, can you take one more comment?
Yes.
So JJ, thanks for the question. So we now have 2 months where we will be line by line making adjustments. Most of them are pretty small, right? So we get the final health insurance numbers, so we'll get those input. Somebody leaves, we hire somebody, they're hired at a lower salary, you know, whatever. Those adjustments will continue to be made. If there are changes that are substantial between now and the end of the year, we might all be in trouble, right? Our hope is that there are none that are substantial. But I think this board and Steve, I think your comment was directed to, if you set it at 3.6, you kind of think that all the minor adds and deducts from now until December aren't going to change the bottom line. If you philosophically want to change something and say, well, you're proposing to spend $238,000 of reserves, we know based on Kelly's report and our fund balance, we could make that 500 and lower the levy. We should have that conversation today, because what's going to go out in the mail to your taxpayers would be substantially different. And I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that, you know, just as you think about the role today, you don't adopt the budget per se today, but you kind of, I'm hopeful that you have an intuitive sense that what you've seen the department heads present is kind of where you're going to land. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, David, we all know that if, God forbid, the boiler blew up in the courthouse and Pete came to you and said, you know, it's gonna be $185,000 to fix that thing. That's gonna change our budget. After what we've seen today and what we know, that's why we have that account. So we have some fallback money.
Sure.
So we don't have to say, oh, Jeff, you can't hire that sergeant and whatever, you know. Anyway, any other questions? Thank you, everybody, for, it seems.
Got one. Mr. Chair, could I ask a question, please? And I ask this every year. So what does $20,652,675 equate to as a percentage increase?
3.6.
Thank you.
Usually ask it the other way around. No, no. We're not trying to, you know us, Gussie, we're not trying to hide behind anything. This is what it is. People like percentages. We levy in dollars, so that's how we got to make the motion. Yes.
Can I make a quick comment? Because you did walk in a little late. One of the things, the reason we got at 3.6 was because we were really close to that 60% tax rate. And that gets us to 60% tax rate. So we actually lowered it from 63.032 to 60%.
Change in market value.
Yep. So that was kind of one of our, and that means something.
And Gussie, thanks for asking that question, because honestly, I don't know if there's 2 people in this county that when they open up their tax statement, it's going to equate to 3.6%. Kelly does these sheets and I really appreciate it, but there's not many that hit at 3.6%. But overall, that's what it is. Any other questions? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? For all the hard work, it seems like I tell people, they ask, are you just starting your budget yet? I said, we really started in January. It's an ongoing forever, and then we pick up the pace in June and July. Let's do our commissioner report, soil and water.
Yeah, pretty uneventful. I got the minutes here. There was a comment with the NRGB grants that I guess I should direct towards Dave. Might be some slight changes that might be of interest to the county. Checking it out. They still have a vacant position in their wildlife position. They discussed again about approving Juneteenth as a holiday. They're going to wait and see what the state does yet. There was some discussion on their board per diems. They're going to hold off on any decisions there yet. And Bowser is going to be working from home now for quite some time with the whole decisions they've made with their pandemic situation. And that's all. That's it. And I do have a copy of the draft minutes if anybody wanted to see anything else.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
State, local officials webinar.
I was gonna go to that, and I didn't realize that it was East Central Time versus
Okay.
Central, so I caught the last 15 minutes and they quit 10 minutes early. So, but it's gonna be online and I still want to watch it, so I'll let you know later.
Okay. Minnesota Jobs and Training Services, we had that 2 Fridays ago, I guess, but anyway, unemployment, we had some discussion about that because unemployment in central Minnesota is 3.4%. In Pine County is 3.7%. I don't remember a day in my life that I paid attention that we had as low an unemployment rate as 3.7%. And so the question that I have had for a while is, hey, why is that? Is it because everybody's sitting at home, drawing their $300, and when that has petered out, is things going to change? Somebody points out to me that, because that's what I hear all the time. There were some states that have discontinued the extended unemployment benefits several months ago, hasn't changed their unemployment rate. So we're in a different world. And it's like trying to define homelessness. There's 100 reasons why somebody is in that position. There's 100 reasons why we got X amount of openings in the jail or wherever else people are looking for workers. Some of them are that the workforce has aged out.
Baby boomers.
Those of us my age and a few years younger than me have, and Terry's one of them, we've got to the age of retirement and we took it. There's a lot of people who were working, both parents were working. They have determined that, mom or dad staying home with the kids and one of the spouses working. We're still paying our bills. Our family life is so much better. I think we're going to keep doing this till our kids get out of school. There's a lot of reasons why the job market is, it's kind of scary for me because 3 points that I remember when I took the economy classes 50 years ago, about 4% was considered full employment. So I don't know that there's a big backlog of people waiting to knock on your door if you're an employer to take that job. And I'm not an economist, so I don't know any more than that, except that I do know that our number, published number for Pine County is 3.7 unemployment. And if you look back in the history of time, that is an extremely low number. So East Central Solid Waste, we had a tour, actually met in Cambridge at the transfer site. If you remember, they had a fire there in July, I believe. Kind of burned, didn't destroy the building. There's extensive damage, so we're gonna fix that building. Hopefully they can get it fixed for winter, because one of the things that got damaged was the ceiling stuff and the big doors. Well, they don't need doors to keep it warm in there. They need doors to shut when the wind's blowing, so all the garbage doesn't blow out, because the garbage truck comes and dumps on the floor, and then they got a big loader, they pick it up, smash it into a semi until they get an 80,000 pound load, and then they take it to Mora to the landfill. So same thing they do in Hinckley, except in Cambridge, they get about 400 tons of garbage a day in the summer. Extremely busy. So we are beginning plans to build a new transfer station. They'll take the remodeled old transfer station and make that more into a demo transfer, demo 2x4s and all that kind of stuff. Desperately need a better separation. We got to figure something out. I just read David sent me an article in all over the nation. We're doing a much better job of recycling than we ever did, but our landfill fills are filling up faster than they ever have, because we get so much garbage. Every time you go grocery shopping, you carry home how many sacks of garbage, So anyway, that's where we're at there.
They go after the makers that are making, when you go buy your stuff, a lot of it is garbage that they're putting it in, or they're making it so that it's not.
I would agree, but what can the Pine County Board do? What can the East Central Solid Waste Commission do about that? I think we all know people in the legislative branch that can probably do something about that, but it's difficult. Go buy the thing I laugh about. You buy one of those little things about this big to put in your game camera. Well, after you've spent a half hour with your hunting knife trying to get the stupid little chip out of there, you throw away a wad of plastic. And the thing is, how small those are.
Oh, yeah.
Good grief.
There's cool pictures on them.
Anyway, we'll move on to the regional library.
A big topic was the phase building and purchasing that. And one of the issues that we had was the contract with the city of Sandstone. And that has to be finalized so that they can finalize their grant so that that process can go through. There were some issues that they had because the way it sounded, they thought that the library had to go to the city for decisions instead of it being part of the county. And so I had Reese relook at the contract, and I think they're making those changes and getting that done so that we can continue on with that. But yeah, that's going to be a really exciting one. But that was a big topic for Pine. Thank you again, Reese, for doing that.
Rural counties. Terry and I went to that on Wednesday. In my mind, it was a couple-hour infomercial for a company that makes some things they put in lakes and they come out magically clean. But they wouldn't tell you what is in those boxes. It's proprietary information. And they wouldn't tell you how much they cost. So
They take out contaminants or what?
they just make the lake clear. They didn't have a lot of detailed information about how it worked. I don't know. I think they'd do really good at 3 o'clock in the morning on an infomercial, but
So I will say, I think because it was their regional meeting that they put their best foot forward and tried to get a lot of things in there. Whatever you decide to do with that board, if you believe it's not the best board to be on, I will stand behind you on that.
I think, I don't know at what day we make that decision. Is it
You,
next meeting?
yeah,
Or is
and it could be a decision by not making a decision.
Yeah, we just don't renew our membership.
Yeah, so if we get the renewal notice and we don't submit it, if no one objects on the board, then that could be it.
Okay.
They're good people, but we're meet with them a lot on other things in AMC, so. Pine County Chemical Health Coalition.
We went through the minutes earlier.
Okay.
I mentioned the lines.
Yep.
So
All right. AMC Policy Conference, Terry and I both went to that. I came away from there feeling really good that, first of all, we're in a pretty good position. Some good, you can give your opinion, but I think we're on the right track. And in our policy, I kind of jumped between two policy committees because that's the way I am. I went to transportation and then I went to general government. And I think transportation will do okay with whether or not I'm there to take a vote. General government, I'm interested in what they're doing because I think that's where a lot of the policies that we work with come out of.
So, and I was in on public health, and some of ours that we were talking about actually went over to the general because it grouped together, they had just had more power. So one of the big topics that we were talking about with public health is the workforce, and the fact that we don't have the workforce, that we're having issues getting the workforce. And so then we went to the vaccine mandates, and if they mandate vaccinations, how many more people we're going to be losing with that. And so that's one of the things that they'll be talking to the state about. They talked about the refugees coming in, and if they come in with the proper papers and do it the right way, how that will add to our workforce. So we did talk about that. Public health, I have to say Becky is amazing. I asked her for a list of what was important for us to work on for our county, and she gave me a sheet of paper with what it is, what it does, the reason why it will benefit us, and what we would want to ask for. I mean, she just goes so over and aboard. She's just a blessing. And so we worked on the public health mandates and what they're mandated to report and how much more time it takes for them at their desks to give that instead of being able to serve the public the way that we need them to serve the public. So that's going to be coming up there. And we did get to talk about ICWA a little bit, which was good because there's not many people that have they had tribal bands in their counties. So to be able to bring that up and talk to people that did have that and to bring that up as a need was a good thing to do.
We in general government, ICWA came up.
Oh, good.
And we made sure it got on their top 5.
Good.
Even though the lady sitting right over here from me had no clue what it meant or whatever. And so now she does know. And but PILT and ICWA are two kind of regional things that we care about certainly. And they are on AMC's radar screen for sure. And whether or not, even if they don't get in their top platform things, we know that, Matt Hilgard is dialed into that. He will help us on that, alert if there's an issue.
The other thing, we got to sit in on a panel for Pine County and for what we did with the CARES Act money, being able to do the fast track program with Pine Tech. And told him to pat Steve on the back because he was on the board when they did that and as the chair. And when I talked to him, nobody patted him on the back yet, but people did come up and wanted to know more about it and how they could go forth with that because we do have a workforce issue. And so they wanted to know how they could bring that in with the hopes that it would keep people in their community more and bring more into work.
I wasn't there for the panel, but I did hear from the AMC staff from like Matt Hilgard and two other staff members that you did an awesome job.
Good.
And so thank you very much for representing Pine County. The other thing, Terry, remember the guy that talked about conflicts?
Yes.
Remember his name?
No, but he was good.
We got to find his name because I think it might be a subject when we have our county-wide meetings with townships and cities. He was a realist talking about, because we have people that get in your face
Right.
and you got to deal with them.
Yeah, he was very good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just to talk about the policy piece a little bit more. So the priorities that were set by the committees at the fall conference come to the district meetings and you get to vote on them if you're at the district meeting. So October 14th in Carlton is our district meeting and you'll get a list of all of the top priorities from these committees and you get to vote on them.
Okay.
And so it's very important that it's coming out of our Northeast Minnesota district. I know we'll have PILT and EQUA there. So we got to raise that to the top. Jay,
I'm familiar with PILT, but what's the other one?
PILT is
Payment in lieu of tax.
payment in lieu of taxes.
And the other one?
It was Indian Child Welfare Act. If you have an Indian tribe in your area and these out of home placement costs, we believe should be borne by the federal and state government and not the local government where that child resides. Because in our case, we have a lot of kids who come through Indian court. We never see that kid. We never touch that kid. We get the bill for him. And we don't think that's fair.
So on that note, though, Mille Lacs Band is working to get themselves set up so that they can work with their kids, and then that would take that off.
That would take that off our plate.
So it's a long process, and they've been working on it for a long time, but hopefully that's coming to a head. And the paperwork that comes with those clientele are also crazy for our human service people. So it would be nice to not have that on our shoulders.
That process is initiative tribe. So
Yeah.
if you're that initiative tribe, that's what it's referring to.
And Minnesota is one of the only states in the US that puts it all on the county. There isn't many other ones.
We're number 49 out of 50th in state funding for out-of-home placement.
Do a lot, good job in the state on a lot of things, but not that.
Yeah.
There was a guy from North Carolina who talked about the whole funding of HHS kind of things. And
He was talking about the opioids.
the opiate settlement.
Yeah.
But it kind of trickles out of
Right.
how HHS is run, and in North Carolina, that it's run the same way it is here. And so they have negotiated a deal with the Attorney General's office in North Carolina where they get 85% of the money will go right to the county. So
What
that's
is Minnesota at 15%?
15%.
I think that's our minimum is 15.
Yeah, that's a default button.
Right.
So they're negotiating hard on that one, but he was really informative. You know, he
was good. He was good. Introducing positive norm reduction mental health stigma. What's that?
That was through AMC. And it's just, no, actually, that would have been through Montana Institute, I believe. And it's just working with trying to figure out how to reduce the mental health stigma and introducing the positive norms, how, introducing positiveness to people. and getting people to think more positively instead of going down into the pits of despair.
How about Shack?
Shack, we had our meeting at the conference more or less, and it was going through the policies and what we needed to do with that. There's some changes coming up with them. They usually have a conference and they're trying to figure out how to do their conference without, with the Delta variants and everything, so.
Negotiation, any more updates?
I don't, we closed the gap quite a bit yesterday. We picked away a lot. We have another meeting coming up, but
On the 13th is our next negotiation session.
I'd say it's pretty productive. Other than when the power went out.
It was a good meeting. A lot of it was just getting an understanding as to how things work. They asked about like a special insurance for the dispatchers because they have more responsibilities, and David was able to explain that what we have and how we protect our employees through what we have. And it was, things like just that communication was really good.
Lakes and Pines, we met yesterday. Probably the big thing, they have an annual meeting requirement, and the annual meeting traditionally is a dinner where they get a couple hundred people there and they kind of showcase some of the projects that have been going on. Last year, we just pared that way down to staff and board members. And this year, because of the resurgence in East Central Minnesota of the Delta variant, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to have board members just conduct business and not even have a meal and go home. Basically, we have some awards to give out. We'll ask the awardees to be there, and that's it. Any other items?
JJ, do you want to talk about the trail at all?
Trail. Oh, yes, just came in.
The Sioux line, yeah, the grant.
Yeah, got a copy of the email. So they're looking, there's some, if I understand right, grant money coming. The county owns it. And they're looking for money to match with the Snowmobile Riders.
Northern Riders.
Yeah.
Applied for a grant. County supported that grant. The grant has now been awarded. There's a local match of $30,000. And so Terry Peterson from the Snowmobile Club has asked if the county would make 1/2 of the match. So the Snowmobile Club would put in 50 and he's asking the county for 15. Did I say 50? 15.
Yeah, 15.
And so if we were interested in that, there is a fund of set aside from land and timber sales that could be used if that were the desire of the board. I don't know that we have talked about the process of allocating money from that fund. I know we established it in 2020, but I don't recall any discussion as to how to access it. And so this might be a good opportunity to think about how to access it if you wanted to pursue that.
Is it not ARPA qualified?
The trail?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
okay.
The only thing I could think of probably far stretching with that with the ARPA is just the damage due to storms, and again tying it to stormwater, because a lot of the damage out there is erosion and what has been caused by stormwater.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's nothing in ARPA that's self-evident that would say that trails are ARPA qualified, or we'd be spending maybe more on trails. But it's an opportunity. In my mind, it seems, since it's our trail, we supported the application, we're being asked to contribute $15,000. Seems we should have a conversation of that.
Would that be something I think we would send to our land committee?
I think so.
I think that's where I would like to see it go and let them hash it out.
Yeah, and Terry said their deadline is not urgent. expect to be working on the paperwork over the winter, and then it will
Okay.
be a 2022 spring project. And so there's some time that the land committee is going to meet in February, I think would be the target.
Good.
On how to spend that money.
Well, I think it would be, if you want to spend the money, there should always be some understanding of why, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that we need a big policy as much as what's the purpose of the fund. In my mind, when it was created, the driving force was we're trying to connect the Oberstar segment of the Munger Trail. Every grant has a local match. We don't have a funding source for local match, so this would be that funding source. But certainly the fund, the legal uses of the fund are much greater than that.
And the only thing I've been thinking about since I received the email here just the other day also is, maybe Mark LeBrun's involvement, just looking at, maybe I'm looking at too simple. The county owns so many roads already and such. It is kind of, I think, I'd like to see his opinion if there's any that he'd want to give on the whole process. I understand it was gonna be for gravel and maintenance of the trail, which kind of falls under, Mark. So that was just my only other thought on that. Haven't seen them.
Can we say that due to extremely heavy use due to COVID, that our trails have been depleted?
They have had a lot of use.
Yeah, it's been busy.
It's been very busy. Yeah. Any other business? If not, the meeting adjourned. And we've got, this is one.